calculate more? Does it come from the heart? Should we use defensive runs saved or follow the OAA way? Who's gonna weigh in with their quips and opinions? It's effectively wild.
Hello and welcome to episode 2428 of Effectively Wild, a FanGraphs baseball podcast brought to you by our Patreon supporters. I'm Meg Rowley of FanGraphs, and I am joined by Ben Ringer of the Limb. That's a new one.
Was that an accident?
Ben
Wow.
Ringer of Lindbergh. I say we leave it in. I think that's
absolutely.
pretty. I think that's pretty funny. You're Ben Lindbergh. You work for The Ringer.
Which we are rebranding as Lindbergh now.
It's Lindbergh. Because people are going to be like, what is a Lindbergh? And you're like, well, it's Ben is
People
what it
still
is.
wonder what a ringer is after all these years, so why not?
Do they really?
Wow.
They don't know what
Still,
a ringer is?
I mean, it's a movie. It's a thing that no one really activates on their phones anymore because it's always on silent.
Yeah, but you bring in a ringer, right? Like that's
It could be
what
that. I don't even
is
know
that
what
not
it is.
what it's in reference to?
I don't know.
Oh my God. We are falling apart. We are crumbling at the seams.
We're turning 10 as a company this year, so I will make it my
congratulations.
mission to find out what the ringer refers to.
I thought it was like, we're bringing in a ringer. I thought that was what it was in reference to.
Maybe, but doesn't, I guess I should ask someone who knows. If anyone knows, it's open to interpretation. You know, it's once it's out there, then the reader can draw their own conclusion. But I like that you're innovating in intros after all these years. So,
it did fall apart. It did kind of break down for me there, but it is amazing how smooth that was for a moment.
I know.
Wow.
That's why I thought you were making a joke about how scrambled our brains are, but it was sincere scrambling.
Sincere. I am sincerely scrambled. I am all mixed up over
Me
here.
too. We're tuckered out. All tuckered out. So we have a lot to discuss. And
we
in
have
fact,
so much to discuss. We have a series
concerned.
of cascading crash outs.
I know. Yeah. Just dominoes knocking over other dominoes.
A cascading crash is a crash in a system of internet systems in which the failure of
now Siri's getting in on the action. What is happening
Siri,
here? This
stop.
is true Friday show chaos. My goodness.
I don't even have a beer. I should. It's only 1:30, but if
we can
ever
take a break, you can run to the cooler.
No. I'm gonna
need to
really feel like I've earned it by being done. Oh boy, sorry. Wow.
Well, we should start talking about transactions or we'll never finish. But I'm concerned that we might not have enough time to devote to the Rockies signing Willie Castro. I don't want to give short shrift to that signing. Under normal circumstances, we could lead an episode with Willie Castro. That's a solid 15-minute move. But today, it's going to have to take a back seat.
Relegated.
Because we've got signings. We've got a trade. We have... The stove is scalding right now.
Piping hot. I think we should save the trade because I haven't thought about that trade for even 1 second, Ben. That trade, which is a 3-teamer that sees Gavin Lux on the road again, and everyone getting to spend
Josh
a moment.
Lowe on the move.
Right. I was just going to say everyone getting to spend a moment trying to remember if it's Lowe or Lau. It broke moments before the Tucker signing. And so I was like, that happened. Bye. That was my sequence,
It's really disrupting my mental image of the Rays as a team that has a Lowe and a Lau. And I had straightened out in my mind which one was Lowe and which one was Lau. And now neither one is a Tampa Bay Ray. They've been a low-budget team for years and a low-budget team, and now no room in the budget for either. So, yeah, that was a Rays, Angels, Reds, 3-team trade. We might not be able to talk about that either. But if you're interested, I'm sure you can look up the details. Josh Lowe went to the Angels, and Gavin Lux went to the Rays. And the Reds got Brock Burke. So that's the headline news for this episode. Actually,
extra industry.
What I wondered about that, because those transactions broke in such quick succession, actually, Jeff Passan, I don't know if he broke the 3-team trade, but he tweeted and cited sources the 3-team trade literally 2 minutes after he broke the Tucker signing. And so I wondered about the sequence of events there on his end. And I texted him and I sent him, I think it's called the Daily Struggle meme, but it's the 2 buttons meme. It's like the sweaty guy with his finger hovering.
Is he a superhero or is he?
It's like a webcomic Tumblr thing. So I guess like he's costumed, but
he has a superhero chin,
Yes, and build. Yeah, he's got the very Giga Chad kind of jawline, but he has his finger hovering over 2 buttons.
The beginning of this episode is incomprehensible to like 90% of the country's population.
Well, more than that, I'm not listening to Effectively Wild, unfortunately, though. They're all welcome, especially if they support us on Patreon. But I asked Jeff, how you can make the meme, like you'd find the meme generator online. So I did a little mock-up of Jeff Passan's situation around 9:50 p.m. Eastern on Thursday. Break the Kyle Tucker signing or break the 3-team Lux/Low trade. And I sent it to him and I said, was this you last night? And he said it was literally within seconds. I mean, not exaggerating. I'd been waiting an hour on the trade, too. Yeah. Because one thing he said when he was on the podcast recently is that he does not like to break news on Twitter if the player has not been notified. Or sometimes he'll tell the player, but he wants the player to know and be informed somehow before he puts it out there for the public. So he'd been waiting an hour on the trade because apparently Gavin Lux was at Reds Fest. And he had not been.
He was at Reds Fest?
At Reds Fest. What a time to learn that you've been traded. What do you do if you're at like fan convention for the team that you no longer play for? It's like, can you just change uniforms and go to Rays Fest or something? It's like when a player gets traded between games of a doubleheader or something. So anyway, he was busy at Reds Fest. And so I guess no one had told him that he had been traded. So Passan was waiting and he considered calling him, but relented and didn't. And so he just waited. And I don't know whether someone scooped him on the 3-team trade or not, but I don't think it matters very much because he did break the Kyle Tucker signing, which was slightly bigger news in the grand scheme of things. And somehow we have managed not to talk about it yet because we've just been on a bunch of nonsense since then. I'm looking at the performance of those 2 tweets sent at 9:51 p.m. Eastern and 9:53 p.m. Eastern or something like that. Yeah, let's see. It's 19,000 retweets or quote tweets on the Kyle Tucker news and about 24,000 faves and 7,000 replies. And the 3-team trade has just under 2,000 retweets / quote tweets, under 10,000 faves, and about 600 replies, which always amazes me. I know Jeff has like 1 million something Twitter followers, but like 10,000 people liked that. There are a lot of people who like baseball, I guess, and that's ultimately a small percentage of his followers. But I think he made the right choice, is what I'm saying, breaking the Tucker signing prior to the 3-team trade based on the performance of those tweets. But the Tucker signing has caused subsequent transactions because there were other teams that were in the running for Kyle Tucker. And when the Dodgers signed him, by the way, we buried the lead. The Dodgers signed Kyle Tucker in case you were just waiting, 10 minutes into this episode, waiting for us to tell you who signed Kyle Tucker. It was the Dodgers. I know you're shocked. Sorry to be the one to break that news and maybe be the bearer of bad news to you. But because other teams were waiting to hear what would happen, including the New York Mets. And so when the New York Mets did not successfully sign Kyle Tucker, they then pivoted to Bo Bichette. And when Bo Bichette signed with the Mets, then the Philadelphia Phillies, who were in the running for Bo Bichette, they then pivoted to JT Realmuto. I mean, I don't know exactly the sequence of events, but I'm assuming
I think that
this is more or less the way it went down. Yeah. So, it was kind of contingent on either or, right? The Mets probably were not going to sign both Bo Bichette and Kyle Tucker, and the Phillies, it had been reported, were not going to sign both Bo Bichette and JT Realmuto. So once Tucker signed somewhere, once the smoke went up, as Steve Cohen's tweet referenced, then that everyone else took their cues from that. And suddenly a whole flurry of free agents had signed. And I guess we picked the right time to do our free agent fits episodes last week.
I guess, yeah.
If we had waited until now, we would not have many more free agents to fit into teams because as we record here on a Friday afternoon, we're a Fromber and a Bellinger away from most of the dust having settled on the free agent market. I mean, apologies to Eugenio Suarez and Zach Gallen and some other significant free agents are out there. But the top 10 types, there are two more of those guys left. Right. And maybe it won't be long until they sign too. Perhaps they have by the time you're hearing this. Who knows? But where do we even begin? Should we save Tucker for last, even though it's maybe the most significant, just because we might have the most to say, and also people might be sick of hearing us talk about the Dodgers and they could just check out at that point if they want to?
We can take them in whichever order. I want to make a broad point here before we do, which is, and I know how fun it is to hear people sort of read their posts from social media, but are we sure that the NL East isn't like a psyop? We can the crash outs from Mets fans last night that I was seeing, Ben. And then when Bichette signed with the Mets, the crash outs from Phillies fans that I was seeing, both in response to the news that Bichette was not going to be a Philly and would thus suggesting that, say, Alec Bohm will remain one. And that there appeared to be a maybe potentially slightly panicked signing for Realmuto, who was, I think, always in Philly's plans for this offseason. But if we came to find out that Realmuto's people reached out to Philly in the moments after the Bichette news broke and was like, so one more year, though? And they were like, yeah, there's no time. Yes, one more. Yeah. It was... Look, and again, as I said to Liz Rocher on Blue Sky, it's not that the posts, many of the posts are very funny, but they are also suggestive of a population of people who have been made deeply unwell by the proceedings of the last 24 hours, really the last 12.
Yeah.
So let's start with the Bichette of it all. We can also take a moment to say that, as Michael Bauman put it in his Bichette write-up, if you're worth as much money as Steve Cohen, if you have $500 million, you should just not be allowed to be on social media. I'm not going to say that the reason that Kyle Tucker ultimately signed with the Dodgers was because of Steve Cohen's posts. That's ridiculous. Or at least if it was in the soup, I imagine it was a minor ingredient, the flavor of which one could barely detect. But Steve... You're embarrassing yourself, sir. And I say that as someone who is familiar with the alleged financial shenanigans that Steve Cohen has gotten involved with. I don't say that like I have special inside knowledge, but simply as someone who was an observer of Sat Capital at one point. So I'm just like, someone needs to take Steve's phone away, It's not the worst billionaire posting we've seen in the last year.
No,
certainly, but it might be some of the most embarrassing sports billionaire posting we've seen. And I say that as someone who's been observing Mark Cuban crashing out for quite some time. So take his phone away. But let's.
I hope they don't, because I enjoy it. I'm not saying it reflects well on him.
It might, it could be a useful corrective, because there have been times when Mets fans have really, in a way that they like to pretend is ironic, but seems to be quite sincere, leaned into the Uncle Steve stuff. Right. And I appreciate that Steve Cohen appears to want to put money into his ball club. As we have noted, a quarter zip and a hat. This guy is serious, but also
hey, FanGraphs is selling quarter zips now, right? You can't make fun of quarter zips anymore.
I can't wait for mine to come. Speaking of being embarrassing, I'm going to wear that to a degree that people are like, should you be wearing it that much? How do you wash that? Okay, so Bo Bichette, third baseman. This is okay. Do you want to talk for a minute? Because I feel like I've talked a lot already.
I was just going to say that the contrast between owners is clear in that when Mark Walter, Dodgers owner, wants to make a public statement, which he doesn't do often, he does it through @Dodgers, and there's a whole mock-up with a graphic and a background and text on top of it, whereas Steve Cohen, he's just hunting and pecking out his interesting syntax, which, billionaires, they're just like us, except with worse spelling.
Except for all the
grammar
ways they're not.
And the billions. But
I guess there's a possibility that he had just watched Conclave and was
possible too. Yeah.
Interested in the conclusions of Conclave,
Yes.
That's
I like that
possible.
he followed up, he clarified for anyone who, he said, let me know when you see smoke. That was at 6:57 p.m. on Thursday. And then at 7:56, for those who don't understand the Pope election reference, we are waiting for a decision. That's all I know. Clearly, people were flummoxed by the first tweet, and he followed up. Anyway, yes. So, well, I guess, the Real Muto move is probably the least interesting and consequential and surprising of the three. So we could...
Yeah, although, wow, that's a long time.
Well, yeah, but we could more quickly dispense with that, I guess, because it's just player remaining with team where he has been for some time and, not entirely unanticipatable that the Phillies might bring back JT Realmuto. So it is $45 million over 3 years. Yeah, with some incentives too. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, gosh, 15 million or whatever. It sounds like chump change now, now that we're dealing with 40 plus 60 million plus all the CBT taxes that basically double those 15 million. That's a drop in the bucket. I mean, who could even, it's a rounding error, who could measure that amount of money? But it is true that Real Muto is 34 years old and coming up on 35. He will be 35 during spring training, and he is coming off a year when he was a below average hitter for the first time, really. He's been a really good, productive hitter for a long time by catcher standards, and was at one time a good defender, not so much now, and had some speed at one point, and
not so much now.
Yeah, well, he's lost some steps, let's say, and some frames along the way. Who hasn't? But they are committing to him for quite a while now in that role. So, I mean, he was still, I guess when you factor in the defense, like Baseball Reference, not considering the framing, has him as a 2.5 WAR guy this past year, and even FanGraphs has him as a 2.1 WAR guy. So, okay, that that's playable, that's fine, but not a lot of room to slip further before he's not really someone you want playing 130 games a year, and then you're paying 15 mil or whatever for a backup catcher, presumably, if he's prepared to transition into that twilight of his career. It's not like you'd really want that bad at another position at this point.
Right.
So,
and where would you play him anyway? You have Bryce Harper.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, right. I mean, you could DH him, but yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
Bat doesn't really support that either, though, yeah.
Yep, so you're hoping that he reverses the decline and arrests the decline at least, and stays well preserved. And, he's been there for a long time. They've had a lot of success with him. Pitchers are used to him. Clearly they're comfortable with him in the clubhouse and all the rest of it. But I don't know what plan B or the future successor will be for Real Muto, because it seems unlikely that he'll be at 37 going on 38 and still the starter.
It's a funny one because they needed, on some level, they probably needed Real Muto, at least in the short term, right? Like the catching market is quite thin. He was the best available free agent backstop, certainly. And you probably don't want to go into the year with I don't know, Raphael Marchand and Garrett Stubbs. And so it made good sense on some level for them to bring him back, but I just don't know that I'd want to be in the Real Muto business for as long as they're going to be. But I mean, you had to do something. You were panicking, you know? You didn't get any of your boys.
Yeah.
I mean, they could trade for a catcher, I guess, but it's a very thin system. And so part of their problem is that like their best available options were on the market, and those aren't good options. So you pick the best of those ones, which is a guy you have a relationship with. And I guess you're just aware of the fact that you're going to probably eat year 3 and feel not awesome about it. But what are you going to do? I mean, you gotta do something. You're in your crash out here. I'm worried about saying that word because Siri's going to be like, I have a lot to say about crash outs.
It's in for a penny, in for a pound, I guess. It's just you're the Phillies. You're getting older, you're getting pricier, but you're pretty pot committed at this point, right? Like you're in your window. You don't know how much longer you will be. And so you got to bring back the guy who will be the stopgap at least. And whatever, if he falls off a cliff or something, figuratively speaking, then you could kind of just write that off, I guess, at that point. You know, you were prepared to hand a haul to Bo Bichette. So it's kind of comparatively not a ton of money, I guess. And they're the Phillies, you know. They've shown some willingness to eat money and spend money. So that's one of the things that a bigger market, higher payroll club can do.
Yeah, can't advise anyone eating money. It's quite filthy, as the case may be. I do feel for them because they are in now. I think they were anticipating having more of an infield surplus to deal from and have that further some of their pitching goals. So I will be curious to see, okay, you're not spending money on Bo Bichette now. So do you go after, Fromber and try to shore up the rotation that way? I mean, it's not a bad group, but it's a shallower group than it was before Ranger Suarez became a Red Sox. Also, Red Sox, what are you going to do now? All kinds of problems. I guess you're going to make a trade with the Cubs in all likelihood, but...
Yeah. In the most recent edition of Pebble Hunting, Sam referred to a White Sox player as a White Socker. And I kind of like that. I might steal that because I always, we struggle.
It's a nightmare.
Yeah. And so I don't care to say a White Sox, which some people do. So you always end up sort of writing or speaking around it. And you say a White Sox player or, Chicago or whatever it is. But White Soccer, I'm kind of into that. I might adopt that. We'll see.
I'm thinking about it.
Okay. So I always wonder what it's like to be a free agent in a situation like this where it's clearly either or. It's like obviously a behind door number 1, behind door number 2. And that if you're Real Muto, that they were choosing between you and Bichette, presumably. I mean, I don't know. I guess they could have signed both of them.
Between them.
I think, yes. I read some reports that it was an either or thing, but it didn't have to be necessarily. So maybe that's less clear cut. But then if you're Bo Bichette, for instance, and the Mets are very much in the running for Kyle Tucker and everyone knows it. And then, Tucker sides with the Dodgers and then suddenly I guess you get a call from the Mets or whatever, or they up the offer. It's, it's very clear that you were the backup. You were the consolation prize.
Yeah.
And I guess that's fine because they're paying you an enormous amount of money to be the consolation prize. And it's no shame to be not the number 1 free agent on the market. Kyle Tucker's really good. So, yeah. But I always wonder, egos, competitive athletes, they never want to think that there's someone's fallback plan. There's their safety school, right? So I always wonder about that dynamic. But yes, when someone offers you as much money as the Mets did, which was $126 million over 3 years, there are opt-outs. Multiple opt-outs after this coming
first
campaign.
And second.
Yeah, and after 2027. And this was an interesting little wrinkle that if he opts out, he gets a bonus. So not only does he get to test the market again, but he gets an additional $5 million if he opts out. Just tacked on. Yeah, you don't see that every day. So
you sure don't.
There's a full no trade clause, but no deferred money in the Bichette deal. And by the way, I guess, at some point we should consider the Blue Jays implications of all of this, because that's a blow to the Blue Jays to miss out on both of those guys. I mean, they've done well for themselves.
Yeah, I think more a blow as it pertains to Tucker than it necessarily does to Bichette. They seemed like they were moving on, they seemed like they were moving on from Bo.
A lot of Blue Jays fans are sad to see him go. But yes, perhaps the front office was ready for that. And maybe they'll make another move, or they'll just content themselves with all the moves that they've made already. It's a little bit different than previous times that they have lost to the Dodgers, whether that be the World Series or Sasaki or Ohtani or whatever. In those cases, they didn't necessarily already have multiple birds in the hand the way they do this offseason. And I think maybe still have committed the most money of any team this offseason. So they have plenty of prizes.
26 birds in the hand, as it were.
Exactly. So the Mets signing Bo Bichette is
third baseman.
I guess. Third baseman,
that's
Bo Bichette.
what they say.
First baseman, Polanco.
That's less an eyebrow raise, but yeah.
Yeah, it's all because they were at one point talking about run prevention and wanting to tighten up the defense and everything. And I guess this could have that effect because both of these guys are moving down the defensive spectrum from more challenging positions to less challenging ones. Bo Bichette was a shortstop, so he's sliding over to third, presumably. And Jorge Polanco, he's played second. He's played other positions. He could slide over to first, and presumably he could pick that up. And it's not like a midseason move. You have spring training to prepare for this. So for all we know, they might be defensive pluses over there. But it's a little uncertain just because Bo Bichette has not played third base professionally, I don't think. And Polanco has played first base for one pitch. So I guess this probably isn't the way they drew it up. But it's one of those things where players fall into your laps and other players are on other teams' laps. And so you just do what you can to get your lap dance, I guess, even if it's from a position that you would not have penciled that player in to that position when you drew up your offseason agenda.
Congrats immediately. You should have them immediately.
Yeah, I do. But
anyway,
it's just odd. Like they are sort of stacking second basemen, but just playing them at other positions. I mean, Bo hasn't been a second baseman, really. He maybe should have been, but wasn't, but could have been if he had gone somewhere else. But they're just betting on the bat.
Betting on the bat.
Seems like a pretty safe bet because Bo Bichette can hit.
So from Bo's perspective, I like this for him. Playing out of position is always risky, but I think the odds of him kind of giving reassurance to potential suitors next winter from third are better than they would be if he had been playing short or even second. I think that given sort of what was going wrong for him at shortstop, which was a lot of range-related stuff, that makes some sense to play him at third. His arm seems fine. So you're kind of getting him not off his feet, but minimizing the impact that the lower body injuries have had for him over the years. I think their lineup is more interesting and dynamic now. You do feel bad for some of their more junior guys because, I joked about surely the Red Sox are going to trade with the Cubs. The other thing that they could the other team they could trade with is the Mets and go get, Vientos or Beatty or what have you. So
any number of guys. Yeah. It's just like,
they're kind of lousy with infielders.
Luis Angel Acuna, Ronnie Mauricio.
Yeah, you want Ronnie Mo?
Infielders just everywhere.
But being able to go Lindor, Soto, Bichette, Polanco, Semien, even the diminished version of Semien that we saw last year, that'll play. That's pretty good. That's a really potent lineup. I like the Bauman noticed this in his write-up of the deal, but I really like the contrast that they're going to be able to draw between Soto and Bichette, because Soto is so patient and methodical and Bichette is so aggressive. And so that seems like a fun dynamic to get to play with. I like it. It is very much not where I expected him to end up. I mean, positionally, sure, but just team-wise, like if you had given me, 10 guesses, I probably wouldn't have gone with the Mets. It is another example I'm going to try something. You tell me if this is, I think that we might be in a period of maximalist roster design.
Ooh, explain.
Well, it's just, the teams that are adding guys are adding a lot of guys. And in many instances, although not every instance, they are adding a lot of guys such that they are creating positional surplus on their own rosters. I don't know if my understanding of maximalism is accurate, but we're not doing clean lines. We're not doing black marble. We're doing bold colors, all at shortstop, or all in the rotation, or all in the infield more broadly. I don't know if it works. We're gonna give it a try. Maximalist,
kind of like
design.
a positionless baseball sort of idea. Just like we like the bat, we'll find a fit.
It's not positionless. It's position full.
Ooh,
it's
okay.
yeah. Anyway, I'm playing with it. So all that to say, I don't know. It's certainly not where I thought he would be. It's not where I thought he would be, but I appreciate the ways in which it might end up being like surprisingly elegant despite the logjam that has been created. Here's a question for you, and this is less about Bichette's specific fit, so if you'd like to put a pin in it for a moment, feel free. But I am trying to decide what I think these multi-year, multi-opt-out deals mean. It's particularly interesting in Bichette's case because I understand, like, someone like Amai, right? And you have to pay a posting fee, so maybe I'm drawing a distinction without a huge amount of difference. But with someone like Amai going to the Astros, you're at least not contending with the qualifying offer of it all. But you do have to do the posting fee, but that doesn't come with like draft pick or bonus pool implications for you. It's just money. But with someone like Bichette, Bichette got tagged with a qualifying offer. And so signing him comes with draft pick compensation, and the Mets will have to pay it because they're a payer. Yeah. They're a luxury taxpayer. And so it's just interesting to combine those things because 1 year of Bo Bichette is not inexpensive. You are paying potentially additional money on top of that from a luxury tax perspective. And then you are also forfeiting draft pick compensation, and he might be gone in a year. And so I'm fascinated by that contract structure. Like, is it a vote of confidence? Is it we just love this guy so much we have to have him? Is it desperation, right? Is this, again, just the symptom of crash out? So anyway, I'm trying to decide what I think of it because we think about contracts. The most straightforward way to think about sort of the value trade that teams do when they sign a free agent is they are anticipated to generate this much value. We are paying them this much. Is there any surplus in that value? Is there a clean fit from a dollars per word perspective? That's sort of the most straightforward way to do it. But when you involve a qualifying offer, it's the cost of the contract itself. It's the potential luxury tax implications for teams like the Mets and the Dodgers, et cetera. And then you're also forfeiting draft picks. So it's like when you're putting all of that together into your value model, how are teams sort of thinking about this stuff? And I'm not saying it's bad. Like this Mets lineup is better with Bichette in it than without him. And it could be that Bo has a great time and decides to stay, right? Or maybe he opts out, but they get a new deal done or whatever. Like, there are any number of ways in which he might remain a Met. But you got to think he thinks he won't be a Met this time next year, right? That he will be, inking a 5-year, 7-year deal and able to do sort of the Bregman two-step, right? So I'm interested in it as a data point in terms of how teams are thinking about sort of those value trade-offs, and is it worth it, quote unquote, to get guys into these short-term deals with optionality versus just giving them a longer-term commitment, albeit at a lower AAV. So I just think it's an interesting little We've seen a couple of them this offseason. So
yeah, and having Tucker and Bichette sign sort of similarly structured deals, and Tucker breaking the record for average annual value even after accounting for the deferral. Yeah, how could you not ponder that? I was doing some pondering myself. It's interesting from the team's perspective, also from the player's perspective, because historically, guys often have a preference for signing the longest possible deal they could. And it's not as if that's gone entirely out of vogue or something. The Mets signed Juan Soto to a 15-year contract last offseason.
Just last offseason.
Yeah, so that still happens quite often. But we have seen shorter-term deals for the most part this offseason, and maybe that's because of the caliber of player that was on offer on free agency this offseason. Maybe you'd think that if there were concerns about a work stoppage that could lead to a shortening or a bridging of the 2027 season, that if anything, players would want some security. Not that they're going to get paid if there's a strike or a lockout or whatever, but if like baseball loses a season, if there's no MLB season and the finances are a wreck after that, then they probably would have been happy to have signed a long-term deal in the pre-cratering era.
Yeah, although a deal like Bichette's or Tucker's is sort of an interesting in-between on that stuff, right? Because they would be like, let's imagine the worst case scenario comes to pass. We lose the entire 2027 season. Well, you don't opt out, and then you're going to make particularly if you look around and you see the market as depressed, well, you just keep opting in, right? And not exercising the opt-outs. Now, for someone like, Amai, it's a little bit different because you have one less year and certainly a lower AAV, and maybe you just decide, hey, I'm just going to roll the dice and opt out anyway. But it's interesting because it isn't, again, like there isn't like super definitively clear signal on this stuff in terms of being able to interpret how the different camps are thinking about that season. So anyway, it's just fascinating.
Part of it is the specifics of these two, because as good as they've been, they could be better. They could have a better season to build off their free agency, because I guess, Tucker, well, we'll talk a little bit more about him, but both he and Bichette are coming off seasons that were marred somewhat by injuries. Bichette didn't miss that much time, but he missed much of September, and then obviously was far from fully operational in the playoffs. And I assume that the Mets and teams are fairly confident that he won't show any ill effects from that. But it's true that the last time everyone saw him, he was just kind of hobbling around, which, probably doesn't help your value as excellent as he was prior to the injury last season. So he could be saying to himself, if I just hit like I did last year, but finish healthy, then maybe I can do even better. And maybe Tucker, same thing. He had the hairline fracture in his hand that wasn't immediately diagnosed. And then he had the calf issue and missed much of September. And so maybe he's thinking, and then, of course, he fouled the ball off his shin in 2024 and had the fracture, and confusion about that too. Just so much uncertainty surrounding fractures of various body parts of Kyle Tucker.
Would be the easiest part to be like, yeah, that's what that is.
Yeah. And I guess there's is it a bone bruise? Is it a fracture? Are those ultimately the same thing in certain parts of you anyway? But he missed a few months there. And so maybe he's thinking, if I can just really have a full healthy season where I'm hitting as well as I was when I was healthy in those years. And they're both young enough that they could hit the market again in a year or two. And still sign a gigantic deal if they wanted to, because Bo Bichette is 27. He turns 28 in March. Kyle Tucker turns 29 on Saturday.
Yeah,
tomorrow. Happy birthday to him. I'm sure it is.
What a, do you think that his, sorry, I want to continue to be very serious because we've been so serious so far.
Yes, unfailingly.
Do you think that his party plans have changed at all? Do you think that there was two versions of the party planned, and now they're like, Go get the sushi trays from Costco. Every single one they have.
Now that I got the 60 million, now we can really just pull out all the stops. I'm getting extra cakes and candles.
Two sushi trays.
Just Kyle Tucker doesn't seem to me like the sort to just have like a real rager, but I don't know. Maybe he'd surprise me. Who knows? But because they're young enough, yes, they could hit the market and they could conceivably be coming off an even better year and they could cash in. So that's a consideration for them. Yeah. And for the teams, I think maybe this just goes to show, we always say it's kind of a cliche. There's no such thing as a bad one-year deal. These aren't literally one-year deals. Obviously, they might turn out to be, or Bichette's might, Tucker's might turn out to be a 2-year deal or something. But the idea, I think, applies, which is just the shorter, the better as far as teams are concerned. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if this is just the new normal now, and I don't even know which side is really pushing this. I assume that the team side more, because we certainly have seen teams be more reluctant to dispense long-term deals, especially to players in their 30s. And there's certain, it was like, oh, the Red Sox actually gave a 5-year deal to a 30-year-old. How about that? And the Giants have sort of signaled that they don't want to do that, at least for pitchers. So teams have kind of held the line more on that sort of thing. But maybe it's what we were talking about yesterday, players betting on themselves, right? We were talking about, well, you could just go year to year. And if you kept having good years, you would profit. You would make even more money. But I do think it's that the shorter, the better. And teams just, they have higher tolerance, I guess, for the high average annual value than they do for the long-term risk. And I guess what we've seen historically, the linear relationship between spending and wins, it's always broken down a bit at the extremes because, typically if you study spending, it's like teams will spend twice as much for a 2-WAR guy as a 1-WAR guy or whatever, and it kind of tracks. But at the extreme upper echelons, it doesn't really, because, if you have an 8-WAR guy, not that there are many true talent 8-WAR guys, but historically speaking, they haven't really made what they're worth on a per year basis. There was sort of a soft ceiling there, and you could get more and more years and you could get more and more dollars. But on an average annual value basis, there was kind of a compression of the range of possible salaries. Right. Maybe that's just changing now because you look at what these guys are getting, and because it's the Mets and the Dodgers. Now, maybe because it's the Mets and the Dodgers, we can't actually extrapolate to other teams with fewer resources or less willingness to spend, because these are the 2 top spending teams in the game and the 2 that seem to have the highest tolerance for incurring penalties and surcharges. But you look at what they're actually spending for these guys, not just the draft picks they're forfeiting and everything, but they're basically paying double. I mean, once you're in the highest tax bracket, once you've been a serial repeater and you're, at the highest tippy top threshold, then you're paying like 110% on every dollar above that threshold. And so the Dodgers, forget about the deferrals for a second. Like, I mean, you can just double basically the 60 million or more, or even accounting for the deferrals. They're essentially effectively spending 120 million per year on Kyle Tucker because of where they are. Right. And the Mets too are spending like 100 million on Bo Bichette basically at 42 million per or whatever it is. So that's a lot of money. I mean, even for the Mets and the Dodgers, even for really excellent players. But I guess that just goes to show that at least these 2 teams, they will make that trade-off. They're just willing to fork over almost any amount of cash, I guess, when it's not something that's on the books for a decade or more.
I think that the Dodgers and the Mets obviously would strike you as teams that aren't in support of a salary cap, like a hard cap. I do wonder if they're looking around and sort of putting their, finger to the wind and going, we might get one though. And so they're like, let's get it while the going is good.
Right. That's another thing. Yeah. Because even if there's no cap, there could very well be steeper penalties.
Right. Might end up with more punitive penalties. Right. In fact, I would imagine that the little, two-step swappity-do that the league tries to do in the course of negotiations if they get to a point where they realize that the union is just not going to cave on a cap, is they are going to push for more stringent luxury tax threshold penalties.
Yes. And so as expensive as this is now, they might figure that this is the best deal they're going to get for a while.
Right.
The other factor that I meant to mention, so I wrote something for Baseball Prospectus 12 years ago, and the headline was "Farewell to Free Agency." I think it was possibly premature, but I did have a question mark in it, in my defense. Farewell to free agency? but the thesis was essentially that maybe the available talent on the free agent market was going to dwindle because teams at that time were signing so many younger players to extensions. Right. And it really seemed like if you just extrapolated from that, and they were signing them to earlier and even more aggressive extensions, and it really was starting to seem realistic that there just might not be that many free agents out there technically. And there was actually a quote at the time from John Mozeliak of the Cardinals, and he said, "I think the toughest thing facing all of us is the future of free agency and the limited resources that are going to be out there." And so there was this prevailing idea that free agency was just petering out because the teams were just going to lock everyone up and they would just never hit the open market. And, I did some math and I looked at projections and retrojections for previous years' free agent classes, and I seemed to find some indication that the upcoming class or classes were weaker than the past ones. And it's always a risk to just extend that trend line forward indefinitely. But I thought of that old argument or thought experiment of mine because Jeff Passan just this past week at ESPN essentially made the same case. He was doing sort of a state of the offseason and who needs to do what and everything. And he wrote, quote, "The reality, particularly for teams playing at the top of the market, is that this might be their last opportunity to land a frontline bat in free agency for years." And this was giving me deja vu of what I wrote way back in 2014. But neither of the next two free agent classes features a hitter as attractive as Tucker, Bichette, or Bellinger. And remember, this is especially striking because we talked about how this winter's free agent class was kind of lackluster. But Jeff, looking forward, says this is the best it's going to get because he writes the best of next winter: Nico Hoerner, Jazz Chisholm Jr., Brandon Lau, Dalton Varsho, Randy Arozarena, Seiya Suzuki, Trent Grisham, Hassan Kim, J.P. Crawford, and Gleyber Torres. The top following the 2027 season: Jeremy Pena, William Contreras, Stephen Kwan, Adley Rutschman, Isaac Paredes, Munetaka Murakami, Luis Robert Jr., and Freddie Freeman, who'll be 38 at that point. Right. And Jeff wrote, "It is grim. And with the acquisition cost for trades enormous, it reinforces the leverage the remaining bats hold. Miss out on Tucker, Bichette, or Bellinger, all of whom cost only cash." And draft picks, I guess, because it qualifying offers, but basically.
Yeah, if you're the Dodgers, you're like, I haven't thought about my draft picks in years. That's
you're
not
not sweating.
They still do well in the draft, but
I know, but not that those guys ever play for them for the most part. I know a few of them do, but not often. And the ability to recover could be severely mitigated absent breakout seasons from any of the above. So that's an important caveat, I think, because I think if you looked at previous classes and how they were shaping up 2 years or even a year prior to the actual free agency, I wonder how predictive it actually is, because we might be looking at the class of a couple years from now and saying, oh, there's not a lot of appealing players here, but maybe some of the guys that Jeff just listed will have big bounce backs or breakouts. I hesitate to use the term. Or someone who's not even on the radar, someone who Jeff doesn't even list there because they don't seem like a marquee free agent. Maybe by then they will. So I don't know. Maybe that's a mistake that I ran into in 2014 when I'm looking ahead and thinking, oh, this is pretty slim pickings. But then by the time free agency rolls around, baseball, tough to predict. Some guys get good. You never see it coming. And one way or another, it seems to work out. So I don't know. Either I was about 15 years early with that take and I was just super prescient, or maybe people have been saying this for a while and it will continue not to be true. Because another thing that I mentioned in that piece is that, if everyone does sign extensions, then the few free agents who don't, they're going to make bank because they're going to be the only ones out there. I guess, granted, there might be fewer opportunities and landing spots for them because teams will have signed their guys already. But in theory, teams, if there's scarcity on the free agent market, then they will be making more. And then that will convince future players not to sign those extensions because they'll look at what players are making free agency and say, oh, why would I take this massive discount? Look how well these free agents are doing. So it could be sort of a cyclical thing. But if that's in the back of these teams' minds, A, yes, they might crack down on us and impose even stiffer penalties. Or B, we just don't really like a lot of what we're forecasting for future free agent classes. Then maybe it makes sense to splurge now.
Yeah, I think that one thing we have seen smart teams or even, I don't broaden this out to say that there are dopes in the mix, but, teams that are really serious about contending soon, even if the season isn't this very next one, is to be opportunistic in free agency, even when they are maybe kind of punting a year of value from the free agent contract because the rest of the roster isn't ready yet, right? If you think that Corey Seager or Manny Machado, those are ones that come sort of immediately to mind for me, are going to be difference makers for you and you want them on your squad, well, guess what? You better sign them now because they're not going to be there a year from now. So even if you're not able to fully maximize the value, you're going to be really happy you have them when you do. And who knows, maybe a couple of guys on your roster sort of take a step forward or outperform in other ways, and you're ready sooner than you would expect. We saw this sort of at the beginning of the Astros window of contention, right? Where they brought guys up and it was like, oh, well, this club's actually going to be a wild card team. So that dynamic is always at play. And then you look at a team like the Dodgers, and I thought Fabian wrote about this well, where it's like what they're trying to stave off is not, they're not saying like, oh gosh, our window of contention is finally open. They're saying to themselves, we're just going to be a perpetual motion machine. We're never going to have a cliff. We're always going to be moving, right? Yep. Like, and if Kyle Tucker opts out in, a year, well, guess what? Then Zaire Hope's going to get a chance to prove whether or not he's actually a really good prospect. So there are redundancies and contingencies, but also they just want to maximize the core they have. And on some level, even though it means spending a lot of money, I get the prevailing logic of it, because it's like if you're already spending as much as they are on Ohtani and Betts and Freeman and Will Smith, and you have this rotation that's, really coming together and stacked, and part of that is because you gave Yamamoto a bunch of money and then you signed Snell. There's an argument to be made that it's like, well, you should just keep spending because your odds of being able to not only win the West, but to dominate in October, if all those guys are healthy and productive at the same time, means that you're really maximizing the value from each individual contributor. It's a very expensive way to do it, but also think about how much money the Dodgers make. They just make a stupid amount of money. They're printing money, right? I'm talking about Steve Cohen's potential financial shenanigans in the past. They're printing their own money. No, I'm kidding. But, there's value in that. And I think that one of the things that we've seen with them this offseason, and now we can finally talk about Kyle Tucker's fit on the Dodgers, is that they have, what have been their big signings this offseason? Edwin Diaz and Kyle Tucker. Remember when they gave Edwin Diaz a contract?
Yeah.
And everyone was like,
reliever AAV contract. Yeah.
Right. And we were like, but as long as they don't do anything else, no one's going to freak out about the Dodgers this offseason. What a fool I was. What a fool, Ben. Right. Yeah. They're paying Edwin Diaz $21 million a year. But I think what they did was they're at a point in their roster construction where they're able to build, like, I'm sure that they did not put it to themselves this way, but based on what annoyed them in the last World Series, like that is the vibe of these two decisions. They're like, what did we want? We wanted a real shut the door, screw you guy at the back of the bullpen. We didn't have one. We had to throw Yamamoto out there on 0 days rest, and it worked out, but it was terrifying. So how do you address that problem? You go get Edwin Diaz. And then you look at their lineup and you're like, this is so stacked. Where could they possibly need help? And then you realize that like their outfield wasn't super productive last year, right? They made a bad signing with Conforto, or a good signing, depending on how much you want Craig to be personally tortured by watching his favorite baseball team. So, like, your mileage might vary on that. But he was terrible and was just left off the postseason roster. I'm sure they were like, well, we can never watch Teoscar play right field again because that's an adventure we don't need to relive.
I have bad news for you about Teoscar, the left fielder, also.
Sure, but
not much better, honestly.
I know,
but he is essentially stationary. I know that Tucker did not have great range last year either, but Teoscar is just glued to the ground. So
people are going to be like, wow, he moves so well out there. Look at Tucker go.
Graceful, like a gazelle.
Yeah. Gallivanting around out there like Ichabod Crane on his horse. I'm going to make this visual comp stick. I'm going to do it. You're all, now that he's a Dodger, I'm going to be more annoying about it. He looks like Ichabod Crane from the animated Legends of Sleepy Hollow, which, as an aside, is a delight. And you should watch it in October as you're watching Kyle Tucker play postseason baseball for the Dodgers. But, they looked at it and they were like, we want to minimize the bad parts of our outfield production. Well, what do? We go get Kyle Tucker because we think that Andy Pies is productive enough as a center fielder and a good enough center fielder. What if they go sign Harrison Bader? I think they're done. I think they're done.
You've said that many times, and it's never true.
But actually,
it's
surely
never once been true.
Surely now they're done. Surely now they're done. But again, this is a team that is so stacked and so good. It's like, well, what do? Well, you try to deal with your last little annoyance. Honestly, it's not a bad way to conduct oneself at work. What if you could just eliminate all the little annoyances? I don't have any because I work with perfect people who are the best. But every other job, at Lindbergh, your website famously called Lindbergh.
Yes. So this one, first of all, I called it. I don't feel particularly proud of it because I didn't call anything else. But when we did our free agent fits last week, I said, he's going to the Dodgers.
Also, you should love this deal because Kyle Tucker won you the free agent over-under draft.
This is not the number one implication of this signing, but I think it's a done deal. I think it's game over right now. And I thought it was for you.
I know.
But I've staged a comeback here because, it's quite a margin now because we haven't actually mentioned the terms, which we probably should do here. But this is a $240 million deal over 4 years with opt-outs after the second and third seasons.
Right.
Plus, we're including a $64 million signing bonus. Yep. And it's the Dodgers, so there are deferrals, but not big deferrals in this case. Only $30 million is deferred. So, that takes the average annual value down from 60 per to net present value of 57.1, which is still a record by $6 million or so over Juan Soto, who, of course, got a $15 million deal. So that accounts for that kind of. But yes, for free agent contracts over under draft purposes, this is a big blow to your hopes because he was at $400 million for MLB trade rumors. And it'll be interesting if we continue to do the over-under draft, whether MLB trade rumors and other prognosticators will adjust their predictions to account for what we were just talking about. You know? I mean, not even just the deferrals, but just, if everyone's predicting suddenly short-term high AAV deals, we'll see. But I took the under on 400 and that's a lot of money my way. So I am now $238 million to the good. And you are at 139 million, which is a respectable showing.
Oh, sure.
But it would be tough for you to catch up at this point.
I am happy, and I'm going to be so magnanimous in defeat as
magnanimous.
As an invitation to some people to be gracious in victory.
I won't gloat about this one. This is just a regular run-of-the-mill routine type of victory, not a 1 in a million miracle. But you still have unders on Zach Gallen and Suarez, and I have an under on Justin Verlander. But it's pretty tough to concoct a scenario where I blow this lead. But we'll see. So anyway,
but I was gonna say I'm happy for you, and I like that for the second year in a row, a victory is being assured to someone because of an over bet. as opposed, right? Did I take the over? I took the over on Snell, right?
Yeah. But I took the under on Tucker, but it's, he did quite well for himself. He just had a different
under.
Yes, because it was 400.
Oh, 400. Yeah.
So,
well then never mind. I'm not happy for you at all.
Well,
disgusting.
But, yeah, I guess.
Have solidarity. Where is your spirit of brotherhood?
Yeah.
Yeah. Ate for what you will,
siding
Ben.
with management here. Yeah, just crowing about poor Kyle Tucker and his measly $240 million.
Disgusting.
But, yeah, so I'm not surprised, and it's not like I was, the lone voice in the wilderness saying, Tucker will go to the Dodgers, and everyone else said,
sure.
How could you be so bold and a visionary? No, plenty of people were saying that. And Kylie at the beginning of the offseason, when he did his free agent preview and talked to various sources, he said the Dodgers were the most often named. And Jeff Passan in his preview said it was a longer shot, but said it was a longer shot because the Dodgers would love a short-term high AAV deal, which is exactly what they got. So, I mean, it just made all the sense in the world because insofar as the Dodgers need anything, they did need Kyle Tucker. They really had a desire and a need for him. Yeah. And, it's all relative, obviously. Like there are teams out there that would be happy to upgrade to the Dodgers pre-Tucker outfield situation, but it wasn't good. They were 18th in outfield WAR last year and projected to be about the same this year. And so now they add Kyle Tucker to the mix, and that's going to be a pretty big upgrade for you. So they obviously show a willingness whenever they have a hole like that and there's an elite talent. That's why I just would never bet against the Dodgers getting a guy who makes that much sense for them. Mm-hmm. And, Tucker needed to, I guess, accept this structure of deal. And as of now, we don't know the full array of options that were available to him, I guess. We know that the Mets offered a similar deal, which was, when you add it all up, I guess maybe slightly below the Dodgers offer.
Yeah, like $20 million, it sounds like.
Yeah, and we know that the Blue Jays were in on Tucker hot and heavy too, but I haven't at least seen their max bid, but it seemed like they were maybe willing to go longer. But, I'm sure that if he had wanted to maximize the years, then he could have gotten many more years and more total dollars. But this is what he chose, and we haven't heard his rationale yet as we are recording, so I don't know how much of it is the Dodgers or wanting to play with the Dodgers stars or winning World Series or whatever it is, or whether he just liked the terms of the offer. But yeah, it made a ton of sense for them, unfortunately, for everyone else. And, the Dodgers, they will not be complacent. There are a lot of World Series winners who just content themselves with, we're going to keep the gang together. How can we improve upon a World Series winner? That's the best you can be. So we'll just keep everyone here and we'll just run it back. But the Dodgers don't do that. And everyone's sick of it. And understandably, because, it was like 2 winters ago was Ohtani and Yamamoto and Glasnow and Teoscar. And that worked out. They won a World Series. Then, rather than rest on their laurels, last offseason, they signed Snell and Sasaki and Tanner Scott and Kirby Yates, etc. And now Edwin Diaz and Kyle Tucker. And it's not like they've lost anyone, really. They're bringing back everyone except Clayton Kershaw, who was not an insubstantial contributor to them last year. He actually threw the second most innings on the Dodgers staff in the regular season. But by the time October rolled around, their actual top starters were healthy, and he was way down the depth chart. So
very rude to Enrique Hernandez, but yes.
It's true, yeah. And of course, Clayton Kershaw not actually retired because he is going to be in the WBC, which is very funny. I mean, I think it's kind of nice, I guess, because I remember that he wanted to play in the WBC last time, and then there was like an insurance issue, and he couldn't. And so I guess it's a nice way to ride off into the sunset after a long accomplished career, just like get to play in the WBC and, maybe do well there. But it does set up some like sort of hilarious, tragic comic scenarios where we've talked about how great the pitching staff of the WBC team for the U.S. is this year, and yet they're also carrying Clayton Kershaw, which has to be mostly kind of a career achievement award recognition.
You say that, but think about who manages that team, Ben. You think that?
Well, yeah,
you think he's not going to end up playing?
No, I do not think that. I do think he will. Even though Dave Roberts is not at the helm here, I think that Mark DeRosa is fully capable of putting Clayton Kershaw into some high leverage situation and having him just blow it.
Maybe we'll get different management of that team then. Maybe it'll serve a purpose. Maybe it's service blow up, actually.
Yeah, maybe. But yeah, they're not really losing anything except Kershaw from that roster. And meanwhile, they're getting Diaz, they're getting Tucker, and there are other ways in which they should be better in theory because
they signed Andy Ibanez. How dare you?
Of course, yes. But also they had so many pitching injuries last year. Now they very well may have a lot of pitching injuries this year too because they're the Dodgers. And look at the pitchers on that staff.
Right, pitchers are pitchers,
Yeah, they're not going to have a 2025 St. Louis Cardinals like one pitcher on the IL sort of season. But it would be hard to rack up more IL days by pitchers than the Dodgers did last year. I believe in them. I think they could do it. But the odds are probably against them. And even if they do have now sort of a backstop because they have a trio of returning starters who missed basically all of last season. That's the nice thing. They just have, it's like goes in waves sort of. It's like, here are pitchers who are out for this season. They'll be back next season when other guys are out for the season. So now they can pencil in at least River Ryan and Gavin Stone and the very on-the-nosedly named Kyle Hurt. Yeah. And so, that helps. And of course, Ohtani, who transitioned back into two-way play last season.
Maybe people are right. Maybe this team is too much.
Maybe it's overkill. But, they have fully operational, presumably, hopefully healthy, stretched out Ohtani from the start of the season instead of basically at the very end when they finally got him up to speed. And then presumably Mookie Betts will not be a shadow of his former self because he has all of his strength sapped by a virulent bug of some sort on the eve of the season. So that's probably not going to happen. And, maybe some of what went wrong last year with the bullpen and Scott and everything else and trying to know my goodness and, Kopech and just whatever else, like maybe some of that actually goes right or goes better this time for them. And, other things could go wrong too, of course, but it just like last year was probably a sub 50 percentile outcome for them in the regular season. All worked out just fine in the end for them. But, the path to get there, they were not nearly as dominant as everyone expected them to be. And it was pretty shaky. They had, the fifth best record in the regular season. They edged out the Padres by 3 games or something. I'm guessing that's not going to happen again. So, I think that because they are so good and so deep and so talented and have so many resources and don't hesitate to use them, it has seemed like the only thing that could stop them is age. Mm-hmm. That maybe trying to build this perpetual playoff machine by just importing players constantly, maybe that gets harder and harder to do, and guys get older and they get less effective and maybe they get more injury prone and it gets more and more expensive to build a team that way. And so they did have the oldest average hitter age of any team last year. And you start looking at the ages of some of these guys, Freeman and Muncy and Betts and Hernandez, they're all well into their 30s, if not their mid-30s. And so you could have forecasted maybe just a collective collapse or decline, at least. Maybe they all start to feel the effects of aging and it happens all at once and it hits them hard or something. But I don't know, as long as they're willing to just keep spending more and more, which it seems like they're willing and able to do, they might just be able to spend their way past that problem because they can keep patching. And, Tucker is about to be 29, as we said. He's not going to make the Dodgers young. He and Pages, who's 25, are the only projected regulars under 30. But it does help hedge. And if you can keep filling in with basically prime age free agents, if you can just keep adding Tucker, Ohtani, Yamamoto, Sasaki year after year after year, I guess you can keep this going as long as you're willing to just pay through the nose, which clearly they are.
I do find it encouraging that, and maybe the degree to which this is encouraging on sort of a macro level is diminished by the fact that the team doing it is literally the Mets. But it's nice that, like, okay, so Tucker signs, and the Mets are despondent, and Steve is like, oh my God, it was the tweet. It was the tweet. Someone take my phone away. This is like when I tried to make you guys excited about modern art. How embarrassing. But then they immediately pivot, right? And I feel like a lot of the response to the Dodgers and their approach in the last couple of years has been a fair amount of like, well, we're going to take our ball and go home now from other teams. And so seeing, the runner-up sort of immediately pivot is good. Seeing the Phillies then pivot to a third year of Real Muto in that deal is, I'm saying pivot like I know for sure that it was 2 and then he called. It just feels that way to me, right? Like that's the version of it that I'm imagining in my mind. But, it's good to see there be some sort of push and pull. In general, I find this market kind of inscrutable, and I think it doesn't really offer us very many broader themes to draw from it. But man, so many of our top guys are signed now. That's so nice.
Yeah.
I'm pretty tired, Ben. I gotta tell you, I'm pretty tired,
Yeah, me too.
Busy. And won't anyone think of the editors, when they're doing this? Don't they want to? I do appreciate them being like, hey, it's a long weekend. Let's get some of our business concluded.
Yes, that was nice. This had all the makings of right after we finish a Friday recording, all hell breaks loose. And no, it was actually before we recorded for once. So that was very considerate. Yeah.
Quite considerate.
No questions about what will we talk about today?
I was like, great. But this is great.
This had been, by Dodger standards, a somewhat quiet offseason. And of course, the dastardly Dodgers were just lying in wait, and ultimately the sequence of signings doesn't really matter. They still got their guys, but there have been a bunch of teams that have been busy and active in free agency. And yes, they are mostly bigger market teams and historical high spenders, but I'm just I'm scanning the list of teams that have spent at least $100 million in free agency this offseason, or, committed $100 million. And it looks like at least 9 teams. So you have the Dodgers, the Jays, the Mets, the Phillies, the Cubs, the Orioles. Nice to see them get in on the action. The Red Sox, the Braves, the Mariners are right on the cusp. The Padres made some moves when people feared they might not. So, there have been other teams that have been in on things, and that's nice. It's not solely the Dodgers show. They let some other teams sign some NPB posted players for once. That was very, very kind of them. But, ultimately, I don't know that makes anyone less upset about the Dodgers doubling down or trying to triple down on World Series here. But what will make you, I think, even more mad, if you're not already, about the Dodgers is that they have their cake and eat it too, which is that they win all the time. They're going for a 14th consecutive playoff appearance, and it would take an improbable series of events for them not to extend that streak. And because of that, they haven't drafted high in who knows how long.
Right.
And they forfeit draft picks to sign all these top free agents, and sometimes they trade prospects to get established major league guys. And yet somehow they have arguably the best farm system in baseball, certainly on the short list.
They're up there, yeah. I mean, it is a stacked group.
It really is
a stacked group.
And that goes along with they don't just spend money, they do everything well, which is true. It doesn't make it any less frustrating for anyone. It maybe makes it more frustrating for some, but somehow they have managed to keep things moving along parallel tracks so that they never get bad at the big league level, but also they are perennially the strongest or among the strongest in the minor leagues as well. And MLB.com or MLB Pipeline, Jonathan Mayo did a survey of front offices about various team tendencies and how they handle prospects and who has the best farm system and all of that stuff and who hoards their prospects the most. It's the Guardians. Evidently, every front office person agrees. But the most common response to who has the best farm system was the Dodgers. Now, several of the Dodgers' top 10 prospects, including, I guess, their consensus top 3, the consensus top 3 according to FanGraphs and Pipeline, Josue De Paula is maybe number 1. And then Hope, you mentioned already, and Eduardo Quintero. These are all outfielders. They've got other outfielders. And so if they have to replace Teoscar, whose contract runs through 2027, or Tucker, who could opt out then, in theory, they should have someone ready to take their spot. Maybe. Right. Who knows? Because by then they may well have traded those guys for something else. Like it's pretty tough to crack that roster. As Pa has found out, he finally did it. Dalton Rushing, struggling, fighting for playing time. And often, they end up trading some pretty decent players because they just don't have room for them. It's like actually Hope they acquired in the trade when they sent Michael Busch to the Cubs. Because he had no path to playing time in LA after they signed Freeman. And so I guess that's one way in which the Dodgers just
was far enough away that it didn't, wasn't going to be a problem.
Yeah. So some Dodgers, both the penalties that they pay, part of that gets distributed to everyone else and revenue shared, but also the talent sometimes because they have such a surplus. It's like, you can take Michael Busch because we have Freddie Freeman. What are we going to do with Michael Busch? And then he becomes a pretty core contributor for the Cubs. So that happens sometimes too. So it's kind of like, will they actually need to promote these prospects at some point, or will they just continually fill holes with established superstars and never actually need those guys? I don't really know, but they have optionality, as they say in front office circles. They can do either, I guess. So now, one thing that's interesting to me about Tucker and, why would he want to opt out ever, right? If you're getting $60 million a year or even 57.1, it's possible, I think, that as good as he has been, that he has not peaked, that his career year is still to come because he's been WAR-wise just as consistent as they come. The past 5 seasons, he's been between 4.2 and 4.9 FanGraphs WAR. And over that span, he has amassed the 10th most FanGraphs WAR of any position player. And so it seems like it would be hard to improve upon that. And he's got so much going for him. If you look at discrete seasons, which is not the way this works, then he's been a 30-30 guy in that he has hit 30 homers and stolen 30 bases in different seasons. He's been a 400 on base guy. Like, he can do it all. And he's not maybe the most sensational or scintillating or glamorous. And maybe that's partly because of his generic name and public persona. And because when he came up with Houston, he was sharing a lineup with a lot of infamous former teammates, right? So who knows? I don't know whether his national profile will be more prominent now that he is with the Dodgers because the Dodgers just get a ton of attention and because his salary, I think, will earn some headlines and has, or less because he'll just blend in because they got so many superstars there who even has time to talk about not Justin Tucker, wrong sports. That's a terrible Tucker. This is a better Tucker as far as we know. Wires crossed. See, this is the hazard of now knowing about other sports and other athletes' sports. I can now misspeak and cite some other player who I'd rather not think about. Anyway. So as good as he's been, I think he could be better because of the lack of durability that I noted the last couple seasons. And if you do kind of play not arbitrary endpoints exactly, but selective endpoints, then you can come up with a scenario where he is better than he has been. Because, okay, so June 3rd, 2024 was when he fouled that ball off his shin.
Yeah.
Through that day, he was 5th in hitter WAR and on pace for a career year. And then, didn't play for 3 months, basically. Then last year, through the end of June, he ranked 6th in hitter WAR and was once again on pace for a career year. And that's when it seemed that he started to feel the effects of playing with the hairline fracture.
Yeah, because it doesn't line up perfectly.
No, yeah, because the fracture came on June 1st. He slid and that happened, but he played through it and hit well for a while. But then that seems to have taken a toll. And maybe there were mechanical issues. And then that led to his brief benching in mid-August. And then after that, he came back and he raked for 12 games. And then he had the calf strain and he was out for most of September. So if you kind of add it up, it's like a tale of 2 seasons in back-to-back seasons, basically, because through June, if you just add up his WARs through June in each of the past 2 years, 7 WAR. And so after June, those 2 seasons combined 1.7 WAR. So I know we could play this game with anyone. Well, if they've just, erased their worst period of the season and we're just
amazing.
Yeah, just extend their hot streak to the whole year. But in his case, I feel like it's a little more valid because it was clearly pretty injury related and no one really doubts his skills. So I feel like it's possible, like he has that in him where he just has that great June, but he doesn't get hurt. Not that health typically improves with age, but if he gets a little bit better luck, then maybe he could be that kind of guy. His healthy stretches that he had over the past 2 seasons, but combine that with playing 150 plus games, which he has done. He did that in 2022 and 2023. So if he could combine that past playing time with his performance in his healthy stretches of the past couple of years, easy MVP candidate, or at least he would be if he were not now teammates with Shohei Ohtani, but it would be otherwise. And in fact, if you look at his performance just on a rate basis, it's pretty comparable to Soto. Like per 600 plate appearances over the past 5 years, Soto's at 5.3 FanGraphs WAR and Tucker's at 5. So, they've kind of been like roughly as productive. But Soto has played 122 more games than Tucker over that span and, 668 plate appearances. So just saying, like, there's maybe more in there. If you believe that the true talent Tucker is the guy he was when he wasn't hurt the last couple of years and he manages to be that guy for a full season, then, maybe it might make sense for him to opt out because he'll only be, 30, 31 or whatever, and he'll be coming off an even stronger year. And I thought it was interesting. I noticed that at Baseball Reference, the most similar batter to Tucker through age 28 is Larry Walker. And I thought that was a really interesting comp because, another oft-injured, all-around talent who was fairly low profile early in his career, at least for a future Hall of Famer. He was in Montreal and everything. And then he went to the Rockies and he had that year where at age 30 in 1997, he played 150-something games for the first and only time in his career, and he led the National League in all the wars, and he won a well-deserved MVP award, and that probably ultimately is what gets him into Cooperstown. So, Tucker's not going to have the surface stats that Walker did playing on the moon in pre-humidor cores, but he has the capability to have that kind of just, I'll say it, breakout season and be even better than he's been.
I think he'll break out from a national attention perspective. Although I do wonder if part of the appeal, and I say this not knowing him, is that he doesn't have to be the star, right? If that is part, right? Because I think that folks who covered him in Houston would disagree with this as like his true personality, because I think it did start to emerge over time, but like seemingly purposefully blank in terms of how much we know about him or how much he cares to engage on this stuff. I wonder, I'm thinking more about the opt-out stuff and what it means for the possibility of a lockout. Because like with Tucker, for the guys who have an opt-out after 1 year, which is not Tucker because his comes after 2, you're in an awkward spot, right? Because you have to make a decision about that before we'll know what the results are. I mean, I guess we're counting on there not being a resolution in time for them to just have a new basic agreement by December 1st or whatever it is. But you have to make that choice early.
Yeah.
And then hope, I guess, that you've concluded your business before the lockout starts, which, God, we're going to be spending so much time reading tea leaves going into that day and like, oh my God, there weren't enough deals done. And so that means they think they're going to lose the whole season.
Yeah.
Or there were so many deals done, so surely they think they're going to play. It's going to be such an anxious winter, Ben.
Yeah, I know.
It's going to be an anxious time.
Let's pretend that's not looming for the moment. We'll have plenty of time to fret about it for sure. I can't wait for the lockout photography of people walking in various directions across parking lots. Yeah.
I do love it when they do that, and I'm like, oh, it's Craig Edwards.
Yeah. The one way in which Walker and Tucker's trajectories are different is that Walker had not appeared in the playoffs, or he didn't make the playoffs for the first time until his age 28 season, whereas Tucker has never played for a non-playoff team.
That's true.
And maybe he wants to keep that streak going.
That's true.
Yeah, but the interesting thing is that he has not distinguished himself in postseason play.
No, he hasn't played particularly well in October.
And maybe that's another part of the low profile and the being overshadowed because, you know, he's teammates with like George Springer and Yordan Alvarez, like a couple of the best postseason hitters of all time. And meanwhile, he has hit 233, 317, 376. That's a 95 WRC plus in almost 300 career plate appearances, which is a negative 33.1% championship win probability added.
Well, and talk about like the power of first impressions. Like because remember, he came up in 18, right? And then played that postseason and then didn't come up again until September of the following year. Am I getting that sequence right?
I think he came up in 18. I think he didn't play in the postseason.
In that postseason, it was the next postseason?
Yeah,
okay, sorry. I do have a whole website just at my immediate disposal to answer these questions. Okay, you're right. So it was the 19 postseason.
Yeah.
I have such a strong memory in 2019 of him swinging through a high fastball. And Ben, it was 3 feet above the strike zone, I swear. You know, and that's my it's just such a goofy, it's, you know, this man is a great player. And even though, to your point, he hasn't produced particularly well in October, like the idea of me having doubts about him is so silly, but also I'll never forget it. I'll never forget it because he swings through this high fastball and then they cut to the crowd and there is a guy in the crowd gesturing with a smirk on his face being like, look how high above the strike zone that ball he just swung through was. And it made such a profound, strong impression on me. So anyway, that's a story about me having a very specific memory.
Yeah. I'll never forget when rookie Yordan in the 2019 ALCS struck out 12 times in 24 plate appearances. So happens to the best of them.
Oh, sure.
He transcended that. Anyway, if Tucker wanted to go somewhere where he could continue to get playoff reps and eventually burnish those numbers, he chose the right place, I think. So it's just a ridiculous, preposterous lineup. Like the first 7 hitters in whatever order, Ohtani, Betts, Freeman, Tucker, Smith, Muncy, Hernandez, like it's nuts. Craig messaged me after the signing, the aforementioned Craig Goldstein at Baseball Prospectus, and he was like,
distinguish the Craigs because there are so many.
Yeah, and he said, remember a couple of years ago or whenever it was when you had me on the podcast to ask what it was like to be the villains? It's like, yeah, that was a long time ago, and they've gotten only more villainous, I suppose, from many people's perspective since then. I didn't even know like where to go in my piece because I wrote a piece a year ago after various other Dodgers signings about how they had gone from villains to supervillains in the eyes of the sport. And so where do you go from supervillains? I don't know. But that lineup, even just those 7 guys, I said to Craig, it's like a 10-team fantasy league lineup. Although he then said maybe it's more like an 8-team. It's even a 10-team. It might be a little too good. So yeah, I understand why people aren't thrilled with all of that talent being consolidated in one place in a 30-team league where you would want things to be spread around. Because look, they're projected to have the best position players, the best bullpen, the second best rotation after the aggressively revamped Red Sox. They have the highest projected WAR total of any team. There's an 8 WAR projected gap between them and the second best team, the Blue Jays, which is as wide a gap as the gap between the Blue Jays and the Rangers, who rank 15th. So, it's all projections, and projections aren't destiny, but they are getting close to lapping the league, at least when it comes to forward-looking prognostications.
Wow. Do you think that Kyle Tucker has a SpongeBob shirt like Larry Walker's?
I think probably not.
It would be the most personality forward.
I know,
thing
that's
he's
why I
ever
don't
done.
think so. Yeah, it would
We'd be like,
too.
is he a SpongeBob guy?
Yeah, I know something about Kyle Tucker and his personal interests.
Do I know something? I
guess he likes SpongeBob.
I love that. Do I know something? What kind of something? I don't know. Something. Mm-hmm. Something.
Well, look, I'm tired of writing reactions to Dodgers signing and winning things, so I get it. Like I am well aware of the fact, as a former fan of a particular team, that I am no longer a fan of a particular team, and I view the sport through a different lens than most people who follow baseball, and so it's not as personally dispiriting to me when the Dodgers are great, because it doesn't mean that my team is not going to win, right? And I do understand, though, having been in that position, how people feel. And, you pile on one signing after another and one title after another, and it gets more and more tiresome and intolerable and predictable, basically. And, it's just like, once more unto the breach. It's, put on your hard hats. We're venturing into the content mines. It's time to talk about another Dodger signing and a record contract to boot. And really, what is there that's new that you could possibly say? So we've probably said it all in previous Dodgers discussions, but it all gets re-aired and rehashed every time one of these things happens.
Yeah, maybe. It is just it's funny too, because we have there's all this gnashing of teeth, right? And consideration. And I understand why, particularly given the labor stuff we're about to go through. I just don't know that ultimately the perception, I think it matters how ownership feels about this stuff and the Dodgers of it all, but I don't know that it really matters that much how the fans feel about the whole thing. I'm not sure that it matters, No,
I've heard that it doesn't from people involved in these things, that it's just like, if you don't have a seat at the table and you're not directly involved in bargaining, it's noise, really. The public perception, maybe does it move the needle a tiny bit? Does it weaken someone's resolve or strengthen someone else's resolve, or undercut messaging from your leadership, or make it harder to band together and present a united front? Maybe, but I don't think it really has a huge impact.
It was Kyle Tucker against Emilio Pagan in the ALDS.
Okay.
That's what it was, Ben. It was Kyle Tucker against Emilio Pagan when Emilio Pagan was still...
I'm sure he's still haunted by that. He has nightmares.
I mean, it was, Ben, to be clear, an ugly swing. This GIF has degraded to the point of looking like an impressionist painting. But I want you to scroll down, and I want you to look at the swing I just sent you, because I want to tell you, it's a bad swing. It's like, where is that swing? Oh, it's way up there. And then there's the guy. I love the guy. How high is this high up?
Oh yeah, he's a tall man, and that is neck high at the very least.
Yeah, that is.
Neck high, I guess, is a fairly wide range when you're talking about Kyle Tucker, but it's up there. So, I'll link to that if anyone wants to watch that and console yourself with the thought that that's the guy the Dodgers are getting, but not exactly. So, Anyway, I get it. I understand the frustrations. Sure. I sympathize. I guess my one little silver lining, not that this will make anyone feel better, but it's been worse. There's been an even bigger imbalance in the past, because I'm not going to suggest that there's no imbalance here. When you have the Dodgers, and spending is different from what teams could afford to spend and everything, but we know that no other team is quite in the same situation as the Dodgers. And so when you have the Dodgers at the top end of the payroll scale, without even accounting for the penalties and everything, which they paid something like $169 million last year just in the CBT taxes, the overages, and it'll probably be more than that this year. But when you have the Dodgers at, 429 or whatever their projected payroll is right now, and the Marlins at 69 million, which is not nice. And that's barely enough to cover the cost of one Kyle Tucker, right? And, when you have one team spending 6 times more than another team, it's probably not ideal. It's certainly not ideal for the perception, at least, of whether this is, a fair, balanced playing field. Not that it ever has been. Of course, even if you concede that that's a problem, there's the question of, is the top end the problem or is the bottom end the problem? And I would suggest that the several low payroll clubs, even some of the successful ones that are just stubbornly spending below their means and cashing checks from teams like the Dodgers and not putting them toward their payroll, that bothers me more than one well-run team with institutional advantages flexing its financial muscle. But both extremes could be problems to differing degrees. Now, it has been even more lopsided than that in the past. And 20 years ago, the Yankees were outspending the Marlins, who then as now were the skinflintiest team in baseball. The Yankees then, in 2006, were outspending the Marlins by a factor of 12. So they were, more than doubling, I guess, the difference, the ratio that the Dodgers and the Marlins have right now. So, baseball survived and thrived, and those mid-2000 Yankees were outspending even the Red Sox, their closest payroll rivals, by like 70%. And the Dodgers are a mere 28% over the Mets or 52% over the Jays, right? So it kind of has always been thus to some degree. That's not that much of a consolation because the Yankees made everyone mad back in those days too. And the Onion would have headlines about how they signed every single player. And of course, the Yankees did not win a World Series in their, peak sort of drunken sailor spending period, the twilight of the Bombers years, like between 2001 and 2009 when they won again. So, you can spend and not win. And that's, again, where you kind of depend on playoff randomness to bail you out, basically, and stop the juggernaut. But it has been like that for a long time, which it doesn't mean that things couldn't be maybe better. It's like payroll is not perfectly correlated with regular season success, certainly not with playoff success. But, even in salary cap leagues, there are dynasties in salary cap leagues. I mean, the Patriots, the Chiefs, so whoever else, right? And I think I'll draw on my exhaustive knowledge of other sports.
I could name a third football team, but I don't want to.
Not to. Yeah. And some leagues caps are harder or softer than others. But the point is, you can absolutely have dynastic teams in salary cap leagues, and they don't make anyone less mad. I don't think. It's not like anyone hated the Patriots less because they were doing it in a salary cap system. Now, maybe the Patriots were bending the rules in other ways, but still, it's going to piss you off regardless. And you could argue that that's good for a sport to have a heel and a villain. Most fans who are upset probably would not argue that. People are sort of saying, you hate them, but you don't realize you actually love to hate them. It's almost kind of condescending, but maybe it's true sometimes. But, I think that it does at least create the perception that when you do have a dynastic team in a league where the band of spending is not as wide, then it maybe makes it a little less likely to people that team just bought titles, that they kind of earned it through smarts or acumen, maybe, which the Dodgers have done clearly also, but they've also outspent everyone by a lot. So, and to be clear, I'm not advocating for a salary cap here, just in case anyone's confused. But I have come around to the idea that, with the appropriate floor, I personally, as a fan, would accept it. I'm not saying that it would behoove the players necessarily, but, even Dave Roberts endorsed the idea of a cap with a floor, right? And it's almost sort of a non-starter because it's like, would the floor be placed at the level where it would be at all equitable? Probably not, right? But like you could, if you were just a neutral arbiter and you came in and said, I will do the thing that is most just for everyone and best for the sport and everything. In theory, you could design a system with a cap and a floor that was sufficiently high that you're not overly punishing the competitive teams for trying to win. So there's still some leeway to invest in your roster. And you're also not just giving the cheapo teams free rein to just prioritize profit over talent, and you're holding them to account too. And you're also not drastically shifting the league's revenue in the owner's favor.
Right. This is the thing.
Yeah. Could you thread that needle if you were not one of the stakeholders? Probably. I think you could design a system like that. I can't really envision that scenario actually being enshrined in the next CBA with or without an extended work stoppage, because the players understandably reluctant to restrict their ceiling on earnings. The owners obviously have historically been reluctant to make it worth their while to consider a cap because, of course, the owners half-heartedly floated a floor in the previous round of bargaining, but it was like laughably low. And the players were just like, get out of here with that nonsense. And that was that, right? So, odds are that will probably be what happens again. And, they'll just all kind of kick the salary cap can down the road again because hopefully they all have so much at stake that they don't want to lose a season. Right. But I'm not ruling out the idea that a cap could be good for the sport with the appropriate settings and conditions, which are very unlikely to be implemented anytime soon.
Right. It's like if you were willing to relinquish your authority to an outside neutral party, and then you were able to precisely define all of your terms, right? Because part of the problem is like, what is baseball revenue? We don't have to, we're going to have so much time to talk about this stuff. But my point is like, I don't imagine ever like presenting my wallet to the wallet inspector. And it feels like that's what you would be doing if you were the union agreeing to a cap, because the precedent for ownership having a couple little rules and then figuring out a way to conceal revenue or whatever to, try to obfuscate those rules, vast precedent. Mm-hmm. So
yes.
I would be fine with, it's like you come in and you're trying to veil of ignorance in baseball and design a system where everybody's happy. You design a system where you wouldn't be disadvantaged because you don't know what your position in the society is going to be. I understand the problems with veil of ignorance from a theory perspective. We don't need emails on this. Like, I don't need to be rules explained. I don't need a theory of justice lesson. That's not what we're doing here. But I'm grasping at it as a metaphor for this, right? So you might be able to conjure a world where it's fair. But that's not the reality of the negotiating table that's in front of either the union or ownership, right? Like it is an adversarial system, and they're going to try to get theirs. And so until that changes, I don't know, man.
Yeah, I have seen the take out there that a salary cap wouldn't hamstring the Dodgers at all; that it might actually benefit the Dodgers. I think this is kind of galaxy brain. I don't think this is, because the idea is that players are not solely choosing to play for the Dodgers because the Dodgers have the most money or have offered the most money. True, yes, absolutely. There are other reasons that players have gone there because of their success as a team, because they're perceived to be a good player development organization, classy organization, whatever it is, like for how players are treated and the conditions and all that stuff. Sure. But there comes a point where it's still going to restrict them because players are not going to play for league minimum just to have the privilege of playing for the Dodgers. I mean, sure, maybe will they do a deferral here or there or something? Okay, yeah. But if the Dodgers were at the cap, it's not like Kyle Tucker's going to say, I'll play for you for free because all I care about is winning a World Series or something. Where they are now, they would absolutely be hamstrung when it comes to making moves, and other teams would be able to sign players because the Dodgers would just be maxed out. So yeah, like all else being equal, they might still have some advantage in recruiting, but all else would be equal from a payroll perspective too. And that would hurt them more than the other thing would help them, I think.
And, at a moment when there's like a real effort being made on the part of other owners or the league to sort of rein in some of the other places that they would spend where they could press a different advantage, right? Like all of the, it's not like we're going to suddenly see a more expansive data policy than the one that's being proposed and that the league has sent teams memos on. So there's, there are other places where they are doing more or at least spending more, right? And I'm sure that there's a conversation to be had about like the, marginal utility of some of the stuff that they do, but certainly spending more in those areas away from the field to try to press an advantage on it. And the league is saying, well, not so don't be so hasty. We want to make this equally accessible, as if other teams can't, like, I don't know, sign a Kinetrex contract. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah. Okay, well, we have gotten real about Real Muto. We've talked Tucker. We've put a bow on Bo. We've done it all here. And I'll leave you with one little moment of zen, which I was reading right before we started recording. Did you see the latest in the defense of the bettors who are embroiled in the Emmanuel Clase, Luis Ortiz scandal? Because this amused me. So this detail came out. There was an update, I guess, to the filing, and there are some text messages, and there's a defense. And the defense is that they weren't actually texting Clase and the bettors about rigging pitches. They were texting about Clase's cockfighting operation that he was running in the Dominican Republic, which, apparently is a real thing. And morally speaking, I guess for a U.S. audience, it probably doesn't play well. Oh, I wasn't pitch fixing. I was merely operating my rooster fighting combat ring. But, I understand that's a popular thing in the Dominican Republic. But in this affidavit, the bettor, who's not identified, said that, he became friends with Clase, and that they were just talking about the cockfights. And all of these messages that the prosecutors, that the government interpreted as back and forth about fixing pitches, actually about the cockfights and only the cockfights. And they are innocent. Everyone is innocent here. And so this document says, while I never discussed baseball gambling with Emmanuel in any way, I did discuss betting on rooster fighting with him. In the Dominican Republic, gambling on roosters is completely legal, and Emmanuel has a rooster fighting operation. At times, I watched these legal rooster fights on Facebook and placed bets on which rooster would win. At times, I paid money to people associated with Emmanuel in the Dominican Republic who run his rooster operation, either to cover bets or expenses related to the roosters. This money was only related to rooster fighting and had nothing to do with gambling on baseball. This was said back in August, and the government, the prosecutors, have said that this was before the criminal filing and that at least one of the bettors involved has recanted the statement since. So if you believe that, then perhaps they were spooked by the filing and didn't think that the rooster fighting defense would fly. But this is what they're going with. I can't disprove it. Maybe it was all just one big misunderstanding, one big rooster-related cock-up. But I would never have guessed that this would possibly be the justification, because evidently the bettor was dating someone who lived in Cleveland and saw Clase because they had met in Boston in 2023 through a mutual acquaintance, and they bonded over baseball and being from the DR. And so when he was dating someone in Cleveland, he'd stay at Clase's home sometimes and run errands for Clase's family, and had Dominican food shipped to Clase from New York because you can't get good Dominican food in Ohio. The affidavit's words, not mine. And so Clase would pay him for this. And some of those payments were that. And the man placed legal bets, entirely legal bets on Clase because this bettor used to be a pitcher and he knew Clase and knew that Clase threw only 2 pitches and believed that he just had enough of an inkling about Clase's tendencies that he knew when he would throw certain pitches. But Clase never tipped him off to anything. The coup de grace is that he used ChatGPT in an attempt to analyze Clase's and others' pitches. And here's a cautionary tale about trusting in LLMs. He said he lost thousands of dollars betting on Paul Skeens because he couldn't predict which pitches Skeens would throw. But Clase, innocent. All roosters. All about roosters.
Boy.
And right after we stopped talking, Victor Caratini signed with the Twins. Not today, Victor. This is not the right time for podcast coverage. Meant to mention, by the way, in retrospect, how weird was that 2024 Bo Bichette season? I know he was banged up, but 70 WRC plus, and then bounced right back to the kind of hitter he'd been before, if not better. Career low strikeout rate in 2025, and just about as good in every other respect. It's such an outlier. It's such an exception, such an eyesore on the player page. All those 120s and 130s and 140s in the WRC plus column, and then that 70. Probably stat blastable if we haven't already blasted it. Fleeting mid-career slump seasons. Not at the beginning or the end of a career, but mid-peak prime period, just total off year. And it turns out, just a blip. That reminds me, I got a message earlier from a Mets fan friend of mine who was a little slow on the uptake. Baseball fan, but not quite as plugged in as your average Effectively Wild listener. And so he heard about the Bichette news almost immediately and messaged me, Bo Bichette? Damn, LFG. And then 5 minutes later, if we get Tucker, we are gonna, he used a somewhat crude expression. I'll leave it up to your imagination. But the upshot was if we get Bichette and Tucker, we'll be unstoppable. Unstoppable? Anyway, this was 13, 14 hours after Tucker signed, but that news had not reached him. And then seconds later, another message. It seems Kyle Tucker has left the building. Yeah, sorry, buddy. You get Bo, but not both. And you'll be happy to have Bo. He is such a good hitter. And yeah, there might be a defensive adjustment period in that Mets infield, but Lindor and Semien should be solid up the middle. You could do us a solid and support us on Patreon. That would be swell. You can go to patreon.com/effectivelywild and sign up to pledge some monthly or yearly amount to help keep the podcast going, help us stay ad-free, and get yourself access to some perks. We'll settle for a lot less than $60 million, but if you're feeling generous, toss a few bucks our way, as have the following 5 listeners: Owen Truesdell, Ryan Cutchin, Mark Simon, John McGinley, not the Scrubs one, though I am cautiously excited about the reboot, and Eddie Campbell. Thanks to all of you. Patreon perks include access to the Effectively Wild Discord group for patrons only, monthly bonus episodes, playoff live streams, prioritized email answers, potential podcast appearances, shoutouts at the end of episodes, personalized messages, discounts on merch and ad-free FanGraphs memberships, and so much more. Check out all the offerings at patreon.com/effectivelywild. If you are a Patreon supporter, you can message us through the Patreon site. If not, you can contact us via email. Send your questions, your comments, your intro and outro themes to podcast@fangraphs.com. You can rate, review, and subscribe to Effectively Wild on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, and other podcast platforms. You can join our Facebook group at facebook.com/group/effectivelywild. You can find the Effectively Wild subreddit at r/effectivelywild, and you can check the show notes in the podcast post at FanGraphs or the episode description in your podcast app for links to the stories and stats we cited today. Thanks to Shane McKeon for his editing and production assistance. That will do it for today and for this week. Thanks as always for listening. We hope you have a wonderful weekend, and we will be back to talk to you next week.